The first time Mason raised his voice for me, I honestly thought he was joking. Because Mason didn't raise his voice. Ever. He was the quiet guy in our office. The one who finished his work early, avoided drama, and somehow stayed out of every single conflict. The kind of guy people described as chill or easygoing, even when they didn't actually know him. So when he slammed his hand on the conference table and said, "Maybe if you actually read Felix's report, you'd realize the mistake isn't his." The entire room went silent, and I just sat there, staring at him, wondering what the hell had just happened. Let me back up a little. I'm Felix. I'm 26, and about 6 months ago, I started working at a small marketing firm. Nothing glamorous, social media campaigns, brand strategy, a lot of last-minute client panic. Typical agency chaos. Mason had been there longer than me. Same team, same project rotation, desks across the aisle from each other. For the first few weeks, we barely talked. Not because he was unfriendly. He just kept to himself. Headphones on. Coffee always black. Lunch usually at his desk. If you asked him for help, he'd give you a clear, calm answer, then go right back to whatever he was doing. I figured he just wasn't a people person. Meanwhile, I was very much the opposite. I talked too much, volunteered for things I shouldn't, and somehow kept ending up with extra work because I didn't know how to say no. Classic new guy energy. And apparently, an easy target. It started small. "Felix, can you take notes for this call? Felix, can you update this deck real quick? Felix, since you're new, can you handle the client revisions?" At first I didn't mind. I wanted to prove myself. But after a while, I realized I was doing half the team's cleanup work while everyone else logged off at a normal hour. The worst part was our team lead, Darren. Darren had this way of smiling while shifting blame. If something went wrong, it somehow circled back to whoever looked the least likely to push back. Which, unfortunately, was me. One Thursday morning, a client presentation went out with outdated numbers. Not my numbers. Not my section. But Darren looked straight at me in the meeting and said, "Felix, this was your deck, right?" I remember that hot, sinking feeling in my chest. Everyone looking at me. That split second where you know you should defend yourself and you don't want to make things worse. I updated the social section, I said carefully. The analytics came from. Darren cut me off. "Next time, double-check everything before sending." And just like that, it was my fault. I nodded. Because that's what I always did. What I didn't know was that Mason had been listening. That afternoon, I was still at my desk fixing the numbers when a shadow fell across my monitor. I looked up. Mason. He didn't say anything at first. Just leaned one shoulder against the divider and nodded at my screen. "You didn't pull those analytics," he said. It wasn't a question. I blinked. No. They came from Darren's file. Mason's jaw tightened slightly. Not dramatic. Just a shift. Then he said something that surprised me. "You should have said that in the meeting." I gave a small, awkward laugh. "Yeah, well, I'm still trying to survive probation." He studied me for a second. His eyes were darker than I'd noticed before. Serious. Then he said quietly, "If you let people put things on you once, they'll keep doing it." And walked away. That was it. No big speech. No friendly smile. But after that, something changed. It was subtle at first. If someone tried to pass me a last-minute task, Mason would say, "Felix is already on the Henderson account. I can take that." If Darren asked me for updates in front of the team, Mason would casually add, "We split that project." The delay wasn't on Felix. He never made it obvious. Never made a scene. But every time something started leaning my way unfairly, he nudged it back. At first I thought he was just being fair. Then I realized he was paying attention. Like, really paying attention. He noticed when I stayed late. He noticed when I skipped lunch. Once, he dropped a coffee on my desk without a word after I'd been stuck in back-to-back calls all morning. I looked up. He was already walking away. I caught up to him near the printer. "You don't have to do that, you know." He glanced at me. "Do what?" "The coffee thing." He shrugged. "You look like you needed it." Simple. Casual. But something about the way he said it made my chest feel weirdly warm. That was the first time I really looked at him. Tall. Broad shoulders. Always calm. The kind of face that didn't show much unless you were paying attention. And I realized something else. Mason wasn't like this with everyone. Just me. Then came the meeting. The one where everything changed. The analytics error happened again, this time on a major client report. Darren opened the discussion with his usual tone. "We need to talk about the data issue." "Felix, this keeps happening." My stomach dropped. I hadn't even touched that report. I opened my mouth, already feeling that familiar pressure to stay polite, to stay careful, to not make things worse. And that's when Mason spoke. No, he said, not loud, but firm enough that the whole room paused. He leaned forward slightly, looking directly at Darren. The data came from your master file. Felix updated visuals only. I checked the version history. Silence. Darren blinked. Well, regardless. That's when Mason's hand hit the table. Not aggressive, not violent, just sharp enough to cut through the room. Stop putting this on him. Now everyone was staring. My heart was pounding. Because Mason, quiet, invisible Mason, looked genuinely angry. And the way he said the next sentence made something shift inside me. If there's a mistake, we fix it, he said. But you don't keep blaming Felix for things that aren't his. The room went dead quiet. Darren forced a tight smile. Let's stay professional. Mason didn't look away. I am. And for the first time since I'd started that job, someone had stood up for me. Not casually, not quietly, but like it actually mattered. The meeting ended awkwardly. People avoided eye contact. Darren moved on quickly. I barely remembered what happened after that, because my hands were still shaking. And Mason? He just sat back down, opened his laptop, and went back to work like nothing had happened. I stared at him for a solid 10 seconds before finally getting up and walking over. Hey, I said quietly. He looked up. What you did back there? You didn't have to do that. Mason held my gaze for a moment. Then he said something that made my chest tighten in a way I didn't fully understand. Yeah, he said calmly. I did. That should have been the moment I realized something was different. But I didn't. Not until a week later. When Mason didn't just defend my work. He defended me. And this time, the thing about office drama is that it doesn't stay in the conference room. It leaks. It spreads through Slack messages, side glances, awkward coffee machine silences. And after Mason shut Darren down like that, people noticed. The next few days felt different. Not hostile, just tense. Darren stopped assigning me random, quick fixes. A couple coworkers suddenly started double-checking their own numbers. And Mason? Mason got quieter, which I didn't think was possible. I didn't realize how much the meeting had rattled me until Friday night. We were both still in the office around 8 p.m., the only ones left. The overhead lights had switched to that dim evening setting, and the place felt too big and too empty. I was pretending to focus on a campaign outline. In reality, I was thinking about him, about the way his voice had changed in that meeting, about how his hand had hit the table, about the way he said stop putting this on him. Not the data, not the report. Him, me. I shook my head, trying to reset my brain. Still here, Mason's voice came from behind me. I turned in my chair. Yeah, trying to finish this before Monday. He stepped closer to my desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne, subtle, clean, not overpowering. Just him. You don't have to prove anything, he said. I gave him a small smile. I kind of do. No, he replied, steady. You don't. There was something about the way he looked at me when he said that. Not casual. Not distant, focused, like I was the only thing in the room. And suddenly the air felt heavier. Why did you do it? I asked before I could stop myself. He tilted his head slightly. Do what? In the meeting. A beat of silence. Then he said, because it was wrong. That's it. His jaw flexed slightly. You think I enjoy watching someone get blamed for something they didn't do? I hesitated. You don't do that for everyone. That landed. I saw it in his face. A flicker. Almost unreadable. You don't need everyone, he said quietly. My heart skipped. What's that supposed to mean? For a second, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he looked away, just briefly, like he was debating something internally. When his eyes came back to mine, they were sharper. It means, he said slowly, I don't like how they talk to you. The room felt smaller. How they talk to me? Yes. The word was tight. Controlled. And I definitely don't like how you let them. That hit harder than I expected. I stood up before I realized I was doing it. So this is my fault now. His expression shifted immediately. No. He stepped closer. I'm saying you shouldn't have to fight alone. Alone. The word echoed in my head. Because that's exactly how it had felt. Until him. I don't know what possessed me to ask the next question. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was the way he was standing way too close and not moving back. Why do you care so much? I asked. Silence. His eyes dropped to my mouth for half a second, then back up. And suddenly, I was very aware of how close we were standing, of how quiet the office was, of how if anyone walked in right now, it would look different. Mason exhaled slowly. You really don't get it, do you? My pulse was pounding. Get what? Another step closer. Not aggressive, not overwhelming, but deliberate. I've been watching you for months, Felix. That did something to me. Watching me. He nodded once. You work harder than anyone here. You take hits that aren't yours. You apologize when you shouldn't. And you smile through it like it doesn't bother you. His voice had lowered. Not angry anymore. Something else. You think that doesn't get to me? My throat felt dry. I didn't know it did. That's the problem, he said. There was tension there now. Not just emotional. Something deeper. Something I had been pretending not to notice. The way he always looked at me a second too long. The coffee. The constant defense. The way he'd scan the room if someone raised their voice near me. It wasn't just fairness. It was protective. And protective can turn into something else. My voice came out quieter than I intended. You don't have to protect me. I know. He didn't step back. But I want to. That did it. That's the moment the line shifted. Because that wasn't about work anymore. That wasn't about office politics. That was about me. And him. And whatever had been building underneath all of it. My brain was screaming at me to step back. To make a joke. To defuse it. Instead, I said, Mason. And I don't know what I was going to say next. Because at that exact moment, the office lights flickered. Automatic timer. Half the floor went dark. We both instinctively glanced up. And when the lights settled into that dim, after-hours glow, we were still standing way too close. And neither of us moved. He looked at me like he was waiting. Not pushing. Just waiting. For permission. For rejection. For something. My hand brushed his wrist by accident. Or maybe not completely by accident. And the way his breath changed? It wasn't subtle. You're making this hard, he muttered. My stomach flipped. Making what hard? He held my gaze. Pretending this is just about work. And that's when I realized. My coworker wasn't just defending me too fiercely. He was fighting something else. And I wasn't sure if I was about to stop him. Or let him win. The crazy thing is, he didn't kiss me. Not then. Not in that dim, almost empty office with the lights half out and the air thick between us. He just stood there. Close enough that if either of us leaned forward half an inch, it would have happened. And I think that restraint somehow made it worse. You're making this hard, he'd said. Pretending this was just about work. My brain was short-circuiting. Because up until that moment, I told myself this was all in my head. The coffee? Friendly. The defending? Professional fairness. The intensity? Just his personality. But now he was looking at me like I wasn't imagining any of it. And that terrified me. Mason, I said again, but it came out softer. Less certain. His eyes didn't leave mine. You don't have to say anything, he said quietly. That surprised me. I don't. He shook his head slightly. I'm not trying to corner you. But that's exactly what it felt like. Not physically. Emotionally. Because once something is named, even indirectly, you can't pretend it's not there anymore. You've been different with me, I said carefully. A humorless half-smile tugged at his mouth. Yeah. Why? He held my gaze for a long second. Then, because I like you. There it was. No dramatic music. No build-up. Just simple. Direct. And somehow that made my chest feel like it was being squeezed. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't have feelings. But because I did. And that was scarier. We'd been working side by side for 6 months. We shared clients. Deadlines. A boss who already didn't love either of us right now. If this went wrong, it wouldn't just be awkward. It would be daily. Inescapable. I don't know if this is a good idea, I admitted. He nodded once. That's fair. He still hadn't stepped back. Which meant I hadn't either. This is work, I continued. It could get messy. It already is, he said evenly. I almost laughed at that. You know what I mean. I do. His voice softened slightly. But I'm not confused about this. That hit. You're not. No. His eyes dropped briefly to my mouth again. Then back up. I've been trying not to cross that line for months. Months. My stomach flipped. Since when? I asked before I could stop myself. He exhaled through his nose. Since the Henderson pitch. I blinked. That was my 2nd week. I know. That did something to me I wasn't prepared for. Because I remembered that pitch. I'd been nervous. Stumbling over my slides. Darren had corrected me mid-sentence. And afterward, Mason had quietly told me, you did fine. I hadn't thought much of it. Apparently, he had. You don't even know if I started. Like men, he finished calmly. My throat tightened. I hadn't actually said it out loud. Not to anyone at work. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't pushing, just watching me carefully. I'm not labeling you, he added. I'm just telling you where I stand. That steadiness was infuriating and comforting at the same time. You're very calm about this, I muttered. He gave the faintest shrug. I've had time. And if I don't feel the same? There it was. The risk. For the first time since this conversation started, I saw something vulnerable flash across his face. I'd deal with it, he said quietly. No defensiveness. No guilt. Just honesty. But I needed you to know. That should have made it easy. It didn't. Because here's the thing. I had noticed him too. The way his sleeves rolled up when he worked. The way his voice dropped when he was irritated. The way he watched me like he was constantly assessing whether I was okay. I just convinced myself it was nothing. Safer that way. Why so protective? I asked suddenly. His jaw flexed slightly. I don't like seeing you dismissed. That's not what I meant. He held my gaze. And this time, there was no hesitation in his answer. I don't like when anyone makes you feel small. The words landed deep. Too deep. Because he was right. That's exactly how it had felt. Small. And he'd been the only one pushing back against it. The distance between us wasn't big anymore. It hadn't been for a while. My hand was still near his wrist. And this time, when my fingers brushed his skin, it wasn't accidental. He inhaled sharply. Just a small shift. But I felt it. Felix, he warned softly. A warning, not a rejection. If this is just adrenaline from the meeting. It's not, I interrupted. The words came out before I could overthink them. His eyes darkened slightly. Then what is it? I swallowed. It's me trying to figure out why I've been thinking about you outside of work. Silence. Heavy. Charged. And, he pressed, voice lower now. And maybe I stopped pretending it was nothing. That was all it took. He didn't grab me. Didn't rush. His hand came up slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and rested lightly at my waist. Waiting. I didn't move. Didn't step back. Didn't break eye contact. So he leaned in. And this time, I met him halfway. The kiss wasn't desperate. It wasn't messy. It was controlled. Careful. Like two people who understood exactly how much they had to lose. But the second his mouth pressed against mine, all that control, it cracked. His grip tightened slightly at my waist. My hand slid up to his shoulder without thinking. The office was quiet. Too quiet. Which somehow made every breath feel louder. He pulled back just enough to look at me. You sure? He asked. Not teasing. Not arrogant. Serious. I nodded once. Yes. And that's when Mason stopped being just the coworker who defended me and started becoming something that felt dangerously real. The only problem? We weren't the only ones still in the building. And someone had definitely just seen us. I didn't see who it was at first. Just movement. A shadow shifting near the glass wall of the conference room across the floor. Mason noticed it too. His hand dropped from my waist instantly. The temperature in the room shifted from heated to cold in half a second. Did you see? I started. Yeah, he muttered. Footsteps. Not close. Not rushing. Just the distinct sound of someone walking away. My heart was pounding for a completely different reason now. Tell me that wasn't who I think it was, I said. Mason didn't answer immediately, which was not reassuring. We stepped apart fully this time. Professional distance. The kind you can pretend has always been there. Mason adjusted his sleeves. I sat back down at my desk like I'd been reviewing spreadsheets the entire time. The glass doors near the elevator slid open with a quiet whoosh. And then I saw him. Darren. Phone in hand. Expression unreadable. He didn't look at us. That was almost worse. He just walked out. Silently. The doors closed. And my stomach dropped straight through the floor. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. Mason's jaw tightened. He saw, I said. Probably. That's not a probably, Mason. He didn't argue. Panic has a funny way of sneaking in after adrenaline fades. 5 minutes ago, I'd been kissing him in the middle of an empty office. Now I was imagining HR emails, awkward team meetings, whispers behind my back. This is exactly what I was afraid of, I said quietly. Mason turned toward me. What part? The messy part. He didn't dismiss it this time. He walked over slowly and leaned against my desk, but kept space between us. He can't fire you for that, he said. You don't know that. He can't. Mason repeated, firmer. It's not illegal. No, I said. But making my life miserable isn't illegal either. That landed. Because we both knew Darren's personality. Petty. Passive-aggressive. Strategic. And now we just handed him leverage. You regret it? Mason asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. Really looked at him. His expression was controlled like always, but there was something tight underneath. Vulnerable. No, I answered honestly. And that was the truth. The kiss? I didn't regret that. I regretted the timing, the location, the witness. But not him. Something in his shoulders relaxed slightly. Good, he said quietly. We didn't talk much after that. Not because we were angry, because we were thinking, overanalyzing, strategizing. When we finally left the building together, we didn't walk side by side. Not obviously. Just two coworkers heading home at the same time. But when we reached the sidewalk, he slowed slightly until I caught up. You okay? He asked. Define okay. A small exhale through his nose. Fair. We stood there for a moment under the streetlights. No office walls. No glass panels. Just the city humming around us. I meant what I said, he told me. Which part? All of it. My chest tightened again. You don't do subtle very well once you start, I said. A faint smirk. Apparently not. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything we hadn't unpacked yet. What happens now? I asked. He considered that. We go to work Monday, he said evenly. We act normal. And if Darren says something? Then he says something. You make that sound simple. It is. I gave him a look. You slammed your hand on a conference table last week. And I'd do it again. That shouldn't have made my stomach flip. But it did. I thought the worst part would be Monday morning. I was wrong. The worst part was Sunday night. Because I couldn't stop replaying everything. The meeting. The confession. The kiss. The way he'd said, I don't like when anyone makes you feel small. No one had ever said that to me before. Not like that. Not like it mattered. I barely slept. Monday came too fast. The office felt the same. But it wasn't. I could feel it the second I walked in. Darren's door was closed. Unusual for a Monday morning. Mason was already at his desk. Headphones on. Expression neutral. Like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't crossed a line 3 days ago. I sat down across from him. He didn't look up immediately. And I wondered, was this the normal he meant? Because it felt colder than I expected. 10 minutes passed. Then Darren's door opened. Felix, he called. My stomach dropped. Can you come in for a second? There it was. I stood up slowly. Every step toward his office felt louder than it should have. As I passed Mason's desk, his hand reached out, subtle, brushing mine for half a second. Grounding. Then gone. I stepped into Darren's office. Closed the door. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Expression polite. Too polite. I stayed late Friday, he said casually. I said nothing. I saw something interesting. There it was. My pulse thudded in my ears. He tilted his head slightly. I didn't realize you and Mason were that close. His tone wasn't curious. It was calculating. And suddenly, I understood something very clearly. This wasn't about company policy. This was about power. And Darren had just found something he thought he could use. The only question was I going to let him? I didn't realize you and Mason were that close. Darren said it like he was commenting on the weather. Casual. Neutral. Interested. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to sit down without rushing. We work closely, I replied evenly. He smiled faintly. That's not what I meant. Of course it wasn't. He leaned back in his chair, studying me like he was evaluating a chess move. I don't care what you do outside the office, he continued. But relationships between team members can create complications. There it was. Not a threat. Not yet. Just implication. We're both professionals, I said carefully. Darren hummed. Are you? The way he said it made my stomach twist. Because from where I was standing Friday, it didn't look very professional. I held his gaze. You stayed late too. A flicker crossed his face. Brief. Annoyed. Yes. Working. So were we. Silence. He didn't like that. Good. Let me be clear, Darren said, tone sharpening slightly. If this becomes a distraction to the team, I'll have to address it. Address it. That word again. Power. Control. I understand, I replied. And I meant it. Not because I was scared. Because I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me panic. He watched me for a long moment. Like he was waiting for me to crack. I didn't. Finally, he nodded toward the door. That's all. I stood up. My hand was steady when I opened the door. But the second I stepped back into the open office, my pulse spiked again. Because Mason was watching me. Not obviously. Not dramatically. Just aware. I walked back to my desk. Sat down. Waited until Darren's door closed again. Then Mason's voice came quietly from across the aisle. Well, I kept my eyes on my screen. He saw. I figured. He's not thrilled. A beat. Did he threaten you? No. Another beat. But he thinks he has leverage. That made Mason's chair shift slightly. I could feel his mood change without even looking. He doesn't, Mason said. You don't know that. I do. I finally glanced at him. His expression wasn't angry. It was controlled. Dangerously so. He can't retaliate without creating a paper trail, Mason continued. And he's too careful for that. You sound very confident. I am. That steadiness again. It grounded me more than I wanted to admit. The day moved slowly. Too slowly. Every interaction felt like it was being monitored. Every glance felt loaded. Mason and I barely spoke. Not because we were distant, because we were careful. And that carefulness almost felt worse than the tension from Friday night. Around 4 p.m., I got assigned a last-minute revision on a campaign. Not unusual, except it had nothing to do with my accounts. I stared at the notification, then slowly looked up. Darren's office door was open. He was watching the floor. Subtle. Calculated. There it was. Not obvious retaliation. Just pressure. A reminder. I started working on it without comment. 5 minutes later, Mason's chair rolled back. He stood, walked straight into Darren's office. Didn't knock. My stomach dropped. Through the glass walls, I could see them talking. Couldn't hear it, but I could see the body language. Darren leaning back, measured. Mason standing, arms crossed. Not aggressive. Unmovable. The conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes. Then Mason walked out. Came straight to my desk. That assignment isn't yours, he said quietly. I know. I'm taking it. You don't have to. I'm taking it, he repeated. This time there was no room for argument. Before I could respond, he forwarded the task to himself and deleted it from my queue. Then he sat back down, like it was nothing. My chest felt tight. Not from fear. From something else. I leaned back slightly so my voice wouldn't carry. You don't have to fight every battle for me. His eyes flicked up. I'm not. It kind of feels like you are. A pause. Then, softer. I'm fighting the ones you shouldn't have to. That did something to me. Again. You realize this might make things worse, I said. For who? For you. A corner of his mouth lifted faintly. I can handle Darren. That wasn't bravado. It was fact. And that scared me more. Because this wasn't just about office politics anymore. It was about him stepping in front of pressure meant for me. Over and over. We left work separately again. This time, intentionally. But halfway down the block, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. I thought we were being subtle, I said. I am, Mason replied calmly. He fell into step beside me. Not touching. Not obvious. Just close enough. You don't have to keep shielding me, I said quietly. I'm not shielding you. What do you call it? He looked at me then. Direct. Honest. Backing you up. That difference mattered. More than I expected. We stopped at a crosswalk. Red light. City noise around us. He turned slightly toward me. I need to know something, he said. Okay. If Darren pushes harder, if this gets uncomfortable, are you going to pull away from me? The question caught me off guard. Is that what you think? I think you value stability, he replied. And I just disrupted it. He wasn't wrong. I did. But here's the thing. Stability had meant being quiet, taking blame, keeping my head down, until he walked into that meeting and slammed his hand on the table. Until he said, stop putting this on him. Until he said, I don't like when anyone makes you feel small. I looked at him, really looked at him. You didn't disrupt it, I said. You changed it. His expression shifted slightly. Careful hope. And I don't want to go back. The light turned green, but neither of us moved right away. He stepped closer, not kissing me, not here, just close enough that I could feel his presence. Good, he said quietly, because something had shifted, not just between us, inside me. And if Darren thought he'd found leverage, he was about to realize something. Mason wasn't the only one who could push back anymore. Tuesday morning, Darren made his move. Not dramatic, not loud, just subtle enough that anyone watching casually wouldn't notice. But I noticed, because this time, I was looking for it. He reassigned one of my long-term accounts. No explanation, no discussion, just a quiet reshuffle in the system. Henderson, the same client from my second week. The one Mason said he'd liked me since. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Across the aisle, Mason's posture changed almost instantly. He'd seen it too. He stood up. I stood up with him. He looked at me, clearly about to head toward Darren's office again. I shook my head. Don't. His jaw tightened. He's testing you. I know. And And this time, I said evenly, I'm handling it. That stopped him. Not because he doubted me. Because this was new. I walked into Darren's office without knocking. He looked up, mildly surprised. Yes. Why was Henderson reassigned? Calm. Measured. No heat. He leaned back in his chair. Restructuring. That account's been stable for months. Yes. Then why move it? He gave me a thin smile. I thought a change might benefit the team. There it was again. Control through ambiguity. I didn't blink. If there's a performance concern, I'd like it documented. That made him pause. Just slightly. I didn't say there was a concern. Then I'd like the account back. Silence stretched. For the first time, he looked like he was reassessing me. This wasn't the Felix who nodded and absorbed blame. This wasn't the version he was used to managing. You seem more confident lately, he said slowly. I am. A beat. Is that Mason's influence? That could have baited me. Could have made me defensive. Instead, I held his gaze. No. That's mine. The shift in power was subtle, but it was there. Finally, Darren exhaled. Fine. Henderson stays with you. Just like that. Not because he wanted to give in, but because pushing further would create a visible pattern. And he knew it. When I stepped back into the open office, Mason was pretending to review a spreadsheet. He didn't look up. What happened? He asked quietly. Henderson stays. Now he looked up. Really looked. Okay. That was it. No dramatic praise. No overreaction. Just a small nod. But I saw it. The approval. And something else. Respect. You didn't need me in there, he said. No. You sure? I'm sure. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Good. The tension with Darren didn't disappear. But it changed. He stopped with the small assignments. Stopped hovering. Stopped the quiet redistributions. Because now he knew something. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were watching. And that made him careful. That night, Mason didn't walk behind me. He didn't trail at a subtle distance. He waited outside the building. Openly. When I stepped out, he didn't pretend it was accidental. You handled that well, he said. Yeah. Yeah. We started walking. Side by side. No space between us this time. Public sidewalk. Public street. Public risk. You didn't have to come in after me, he added. I know. But I glanced at him. I needed to know I could. He nodded slowly. That matters. It did. More than I expected. Because something had shifted inside me. Not just confidence at work. Something deeper. Before Mason, I avoided confrontation. After Mason, I realized I didn't have to be small to keep peace. I could push back. And still be steady. We stopped in front of my apartment building. The air was colder than last week. Clearer. No glass walls. No hidden witnesses. Just us. You good? He asked. Yeah. He stepped closer. Not urgent. Not reckless. Intentional. You sure you're not just riding adrenaline from winning an argument? He asked quietly. I almost smiled. You really think that's what this is? His hand hovered near my waist. Waiting. Like before. Giving me the choice. No, he admitted. But I need you to know you don't owe me anything because I stood up for you. That stopped me. I don't feel like I owe you. Good. I feel like I chose you. The words were simple, but the second they left my mouth, the air changed again. His hand settled at my waist this time. Firm. Certain. Say that again, he murmured. I chose you. That was all the permission he needed. This kiss wasn't careful. It wasn't restrained. It wasn't an office risk. It was grounded. Intentional. His other hand slid up my back, pulling me closer, not aggressively, just enough to remove any doubt. My fingers tangled in the front of his shirt. And for the first time since all this started, there wasn't fear under it. No Darren. No leverage. No glass walls. Just heat. And choice. When he pulled back, his forehead rested lightly against mine. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear that, he said quietly. I smiled against his mouth. You could have said something sooner. I almost did. When? The day you apologized for something that wasn't your fault. I exhaled softly. Yeah. Yeah. His thumb brushed lightly along my side. You don't apologize for existing anymore. That hit deeper than he probably realized. I'm working on it, I said. I know. Here's the thing no one talks about. It wasn't just that Mason defended me too fiercely. It was that he saw me before I saw myself. And instead of making me dependent on him, he made me stronger. Darren stopped pushing. Not because Mason intimidated him. Because I stopped folding. And Mason? He didn't shield me. He stood next to me. Which was all I ever actually needed. The office still has politics. Deadlines. Tension. But now, when someone tries to shift blame, I speak. And if they push, there's a quiet, steady presence at my side, not fighting for me, fighting with me. And sometimes, late at night, when the lights dim automatically, we don't stay in the office anymore, because some lines are worth crossing, just not in glass-walled conference rooms.